So today I'm going to show you exactly how we replaced our entire content team with one content engine that is being run by Claude, and where we see much better results at only a fraction of the time investment, where we have built an engine where one video is being distributed to every single platform that we're on, and then is eventually creating conversion and revenue off of it. Now, doing this exact content engine, using it at human scale, would mean that for editing, ideation, scripting, you'd be at low end 500 to 2,000 euros a month to even get to the volume that we're talking about here, let alone the quality of making sure that everything is being gone through in the right process without any mistakes. Now, the engine, on the other hand, costs us only $50 a month in tokens to run, which means it's much more efficient, it has a lot more distribution, and it has the internet and all that research data on the backend, which I'm going to show you in just a second. And that is why it's so powerful, because you don't hire an editor, you install one yourself. You make sure that you have a process that always knows exactly what you want your videos to look like, what you want to say, what is your expertise behind it. So it can edit it in a way where it knows exactly what you want as an outcome, and not guesswork like the ones that editors might have, where you always have to approve stuff before it can actually go live. Now, how does this work to build such an engine? And we are going to go through all the different steps of how we have built up our content engine and what makes this so powerful. And the number one thing that I already want to go into, because it's the number one thing, if you don't have that up and running, then nothing's going to work. And I even talked about this in my last video, which you can also take a look at, which was how we run our lead gen agency Eclipta at 80% profit margin, which is the so-called context orbit and the context orbit vault, which is a brain that has every single data out of your business replicated into it, which means it has a context layer that knows your entire business. And you can see right here, it is built up like visually like an obsidian brain, but this is now in our branding. But eventually the difference is that it's much more scalable, because not only you can access it, but every single person in your company, it doesn't matter if you have 5 employees or 500 employees, they can all now work with the context orbit, which means they take knowledge out of it and they can update knowledge into it. So all the knowledge now lives inside a brain, all the SOPs, all the processes. And that is why AI can now use that context orbit to go ahead and automate all these processes that are usually manual, and where you would even say, okay, no, AI can't do that. But it sure can. If you have the right context orbit in place that knows everything that the human does, then there are no limitations. It can take care of it all. And that is what I'm going to show you right now as to why this is also so important. Because what the context orbit eventually means is that it has to have access to all that data, so it can, in an adaptive manner, actually make sure that it's always up to date with the latest decisions. And most importantly, what we need for this entire content engine right here is that it knows the fundamentals, such as what editing style do you want, what fonts, what cuts, how do you want to do the cutting and the animation styles and so on, because there are a lot of different ones, and we're going to go into that later down the line a little bit more. Because eventually the good thing about the system is whatever animation style you, for example, want. Let's say you've got your favorite YouTuber out there and you really like their animation style. Just look if there's somewhere a tutorial of how to do that. You load that into the context orbit and you load that into our system, and then eventually it's going to do it exactly as you've now requested it. So that's the first thing. Then second, the voice and script style. How do you speak? How do you want to articulate yourself in videos? How do you approach it? How do you talk? Is it more formal, informal, and so on? Like all these voice rules that, by the way, it is also not only that you have to articulate it, because sometimes it's hard to articulate how you speak because you just speak that way. So what this can now do is it can make sure that it goes through call transcripts, past videos of yours, and it extracts exactly that. So it can save exactly, okay, how do I sound like, in my case, for example, how do I sound like Noah? Then it should know all your ICPs in Office, because now it can make sure that when it goes about, okay, what topics can I actually use? What can we talk about? It knows, okay, this is your expertise. This is the ICP that you're doing your offer for. These are the problems that you solve, and this is where you actually have your knowledge in. It can now come up with the topics that surround all these fields that are relevant to your ICP, that give you an open door, a foot in the door, to then eventually present your offer and really shine with your expertise to represent that knowledge of yours. And then, of course, brand guidelines for the editing and so on, to just make sure that it's actually on brand. Now, once you've defined that, this then actually starts going into the content engine. Of course, this has a lot of different capabilities as well. You can use that for every single part of your business. But in this specific case, this knowledge from the context orbit is now being pulled into our content engine dashboard, which is eventually a functionality which is also, for example, running through Claude, but is connected to our dashboard, which is right now running in Notion. Now, this is one centralized dashboard that we use privately to just make sure that we've got everything in one place, one single source of truth with an UI that, if we look into it, we know exactly what is being posted when, what ideas are right now in the pipeline, what is being distributed to what platforms, what should we right now post about. And now we're going to take a look at the ideation engine as well in just a second, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But eventually what this dashboard does is just a single source of truth. The good thing is we technically never have to take a look at it, because Claude Code and the operator on our context orbit just does it exactly the way that it knows we want it to be. Now, from there, we basically have everything outlined on how we run our YouTube as a main channel, and then we distribute to the other channels. Now, that is also very important that you actually know, okay, to build a distribution engine, you first have to figure out what are my main channels, and from what channels can I distribute the most efficient way to then eventually generate the best possible results. Now, in our case, if you take a look at it, it's interesting because YouTube is right now the channel with the least subscribers. Why? Because we have only just started it. I've never really been very active on YouTube. And now for this new system that we've built with the context orbit, I've just noticed that it's so powerful. So why are we taking this as our main channel and not my LinkedIn with 18,700 followers, or my Instagram with 27.9k followers? Because on YouTube, we have the whole topic of long form, and everyone knows that long forms just builds so much more trust, which means you now watching this entire video, let's say you watch it till the end, you've now got a better understanding of who I am as a person. You've got a better understanding of what I do, where my expertise actually relies, which you can't get through either a 4-minute video on LinkedIn or a 90-second video on Instagram. So for that reason, we want to build the main channel up that is the highest trust leverage. Plus also, if you now have a 50-minute video, the likelihood of you, and that is where we want to focus on distribution and making sure that we've got enough content volume with the right quality to eventually even see those results in the first place. That is where we're now going to take a look at, okay, we've got one 50-minute video. We let the engine run through it, and that is also something that I'm going to show you in just a second. And the engine is now going to decide, okay, how many clips can we take out of that? Which is now where we go into distribution with LinkedIn, with Instagram. And now that all of that information, I mean, all the YouTube video that I created already knows before I recorded, okay, what am I going to say? What am I talking about? But then eventually what it's going to do is going to take that information and it's going to write newsletters about it, which means we've got the entire distribution along the way, which means more content exposure, more attention, and therefore, as a result of that, more interest and more leads if you actually do it the right way. And the good thing about this entire engine is that my whole job here is to simply say distribute. It's literally that easy, because, and that is what we're now going to take a look at, the ideation engine. Every single day at 10 a.m., it's coming up with 10 fresh topics that are right now hot in the industry, that are relevant to my ICP, that are close to my offer. And then it researches that entire topic, sees, okay, where is actually the connection to my offer? How can I talk about this so my ICP feels spoken to and I get that foot in the door to then eventually present my offer, what we said before. And that is where it's then going to come up with all these topics, and it's also going to tell me exactly, okay, top of funnel, middle of funnel, or bottom of funnel, depending on what day in the week we are currently at, so we know exactly what should we post today, and we can actually have it as a strategic approach. Now let's, for example, take a look at this. We've got the source right here, so we know exactly, okay, where did this actually come from? Did it come from the news? For example, a new system just dropped, which was the case when, for example, I first recorded the video about the new Claude for small business plugin. That is just super powerful. That is, for example, where news just came out that, okay, look, the system just launched, so make sure that you actually record a video about this, and it performed okay. And then we've also got, for example, calls with my business partner, where we maybe talked about things where we see, okay, this is stuff in the industry where people just don't know exactly how it goes, or LinkedIn, or Reddit, you name it. Long story short, it pulls out the data from all of it, and every single day I've got 10 new topics in this dashboard waiting for my approval or waiting for me to say distribute. So let's say, for example, let's talk about here, Claude Code must-have setup. So kind of the basics to make sure that you've got everything right. And I say distribute Claude Code must-have setup. And now the engine's going to start. Now it's going to make sure that it's exactly this. For example, I never read scripts. It's just not how I do it, because then I know that I couldn't speak so freely with the camera. So it's going to create the entire common theme. So let's take the ideation engine. I, for example, now pick one topic in here. And then it's going to go into the script engine and it's going to build the entire common theme, which can look like this, for example, where it just basically tells me exactly, okay, this is what we're going to talk about at this section of, let's say, for example, the Miro board. So let's take, for example, this right here, this first section. This and this and this should be said right there, not word for word, but just basically more as a common theme. So I can just chronologically go through the steps and at the end of it have an efficient video. That's what the script engine does. And it does all of that in my voice, because it knows exactly how I articulate myself. It knows exactly how I talk, which means it doesn't come up with some formal BS that doesn't sound like me, because it knows exactly, okay, this is what I would want. And this is where I would tell it to completely redo the entire thing. And from the script engine, it now defines, so we've got ideation, where we pull the idea from, okay, what are we going to post something about today, or what are we going to take a video about today? The next step, it's going to script that idea through the entire common theme. So also itself now has a red line or a red thread to follow in order to now go ahead and see, okay, is this a topic for either a talking head video or a board video? A board video is something like the one that I'm basically recording right now, which just looks like this. It's basically, we've got the Miro board, we go through it step by step, and we pull the information out of it. Now, talking head, on the other hand, is just basically this, which is a lot more complex, because you need more agenda, you need a better script, because this is one that becomes quite inefficient at a certain point if you don't have a script for it. And then eventually I sit down and talk. It's still completely hands-off, because I neither have to create the agenda nor the script, which means I just sit down, I read through the script, and then I record the video. But on the other side, we've got the Miro board. Now, the one thing that I've always noticed when trying to film a lot of content and doing that at a high volume is the problem that I always had is that I didn't want to sit down and create entire Miro boards like this. The entire visual assets, the entire common themes, the entire scripts and ideation. I didn't want to do that. So what we've therefore done right here is make sure that the system understands what type of videos should we do. And if it is a board video, then it would go ahead and it just creates that entire Miro board. Nothing in here has been created by hand or by myself, which means it creates the entire video assets, the Miro board. It knows the brand guidelines, it knows the story already, because it had taken the ideation before and created the common theme. Which means now, from there, the only manual step is that I record the video for it. And by the way, I mean, there are steps out there and there are tools out there and systems out there where you could already automate and basically animate yourself, so you don't have to sit in front of the camera, but that the AI does that. But I've seen that in the past, and I just don't think that the quality is yet that good. I mean, of course, we could sit down and build an entire engine for it, but at the same time, I just want to have that authentic touch. So that's just my opinion. If you want to take that step as well, it's not that complex. Anyways, and then once I record, once I'm done, once I'm clicking on that stop button to just basically let the recording cool down in a way, the recording is auto-captured, which means the system now knows, okay, he just recorded a new video. It takes the transcript, it goes straight into the brain, and it now decides what is the next step. And that now depends on whether we have recorded a board video or whether we have recorded a talking head video, because a board video is very straightforward. It's just a light cleanup, just a few edits, making sure that there are certain words or certain sentences that haven't been too clean, which means it cleans it up. But eventually the board videos kind of come out of the camera done, as it says right here, which is in other words just means that, look, I finish it up and I'm basically done with the video. Because, and you can see that right here, board format is just very distribution heavy. We can pull a lot of clips from this right here, which means we don't need heavy editing because the assets themselves are already here on the board, which makes it so powerful. And that is the board video version or tranche. Now, if we go back to the talking head heavy one, that's where this engine really starts shining, because this is where this is going to save you hours and thousands of euros if you want to do it at scale. Because the first thing that the editing engine does, it starts cutting out the stuff. It starts cutting out ums, repetitions, filler words, or just things that shouldn't be in there. Or let's say you want to record multiple takes for one video. You just sit down and you can do that straight back to back. You can just say it over and over again. It's going to take the one that was the best take and it's going to edit it in, which means that all these little repetitions and all these small details that you have to take care of when you do it manually, it does for you. We have connected that to DaVinci Resolve, which means it just directly edits that in our editing software. And then once we've edited, or once it has edited the whole foundation of it, which means that it's just a clean video that actually makes sense like that, we now go into polish, which means we're polishing the entire thing up. We do audio cleanup, and that is a thing that really shocked me. When I've done this for the first time, I've listened to the audio afterwards and it literally sounded like I was recording in a perfect, like super professional studio, even though I'm just sitting in my office right here. Because it cleaned up the audio in a way where it was so clean, it was so smooth. And then next up, we've got animations. And that is what I said before, and animations is a very big part, because if you've ever worked with an editor, you know that an editor that does good animation costs a lot more per video. If you want to have a video, a talking head video that, for example, in the style of Imagazi, let's take him, And you really want to have that with the same animations, the same quality of animations, and that in a certain frequency throughout a 20-30 minute video. That's going to cost you a lot. But we have now built up the content engine in a way where it knows exactly how to edit that way. And it takes out the perfect moments of the video where it thinks, okay, here we should add an animation to increase retention and to also make sure that people just like watching the video. And it's going to create that for you, and it's directly going to insert it into your editing tool at the exact time so it runs through. And then also the same thing here with, for example, the sounds. It takes out the sounds out of our sound library. So basically we've just got a library with all the sound effects, and it puts that behind it depending on the mood that we want. And then just little extras, whether that's captions, whether it's extra animations, whether it is agendas that are being shown and whatnot. And it does all of these things automatically. For example, these animations right here. This, for example, where I was literally just saying in the video, last 3 pieces of written communication you received from 3 different companies, whether that is emails, proposals, or I don't know, cold DMs. Now read them back to back. Next up, you strip the names and the logos. Tell me, can you actually tell which one came from which company? And it was just very smooth. It just was the perfect representation. When it stripped out, for example, the names, when I said that, it stripped out the names and then it started mixing through the papers and stuff like that. You know, it doesn't sound that fancy if you talk about it, but if you actually see it for the first time, that AI can do that for you, then you'll be shocked how efficient the system actually is and how much time and money you've just saved by that. Same thing here with this animation. Every business in your category becoming interchangeable, becoming commoditized at the exact moment where being distinguishable is the only thing that really matters in order to scale and so on. And it creates all these visuals itself. There are no weird B-roll videos that are being added to the video that you found somewhere on movie clips or whatever. These are actually self-created images, which means it just makes it a lot more unique. It adds that unique style to your video, which is just really what you need to have optimal retention and people actually wanting to watch your video. And in both cases now, whether we've got a talking head heavy video with a lot of animation that had to be created, or a light board video, which was just very fast in the finishing process, we now go down to the distribution engine, which is where the real magic actually happens. Because again, we have chosen YouTube as the main channel. Why? Because it's just the most trust that can be built right there. Plus also we have got a lot of content. And that is where the distribution engine now comes in, because it knows exactly what was said at what point in time. And it then goes ahead and pulls the perfect moments that are hook optimized, that are optimized to just catch the attention and for the retention and so on. And it creates all the posts per platform based on our strategy. So let's take this, for example. We have multiple strategies, right? We've got awareness, we've got value packed, and we've got value plus CTA. We have a few more, but just to keep it simple right here. Now, an awareness has to have a catchy hook plus value. I mean, every single video has to have that, but you get the point, right? So if, for example, these 2 videos that were both coming from a longer video, it took out those clips and it decided, okay, these are the ones that match the format. Here, 18,700 if you followed me to book more calls and become the authority in your space. And then it has a video in there that I recorded in Croatia when I was on a mastermind there with other entrepreneurs. Now, that was a perfect moment because that was actually used to introduce the new system that we've just built, which is the context orbit vault that you've seen in the beginning, on which basis we can now build engines like this. Or this, where I was just simply sitting in my Range Rover, getting coffee and talking about how Claude is running 3 clients' projects right now while I'm out for a coffee here in Switzerland. That is perfect awareness. And it found that spot in the videos that it had of me and therefore put it into my content calendar, created the text post to basically back it up. And boom, we've got an awareness post which performed quite well. Then we've got the value packed stuff, which means now it can again analyze, okay, what is most important to my ICP right now? Because we can do that for an entire video, but we can also do that for short form, which means we've now got 30 seconds to find the best spot of the video that we should now distribute to LinkedIn, which means it took the board video, and you can already see the difference. Awareness videos most of the time are just the personal ones, and the value videos are the ones where I go over these sports because it just gives me more opportunity to actually go deeper into the expertise that I have. Which means it took those out. Here, I doubled my agency's profit margin in 48 hours without signing a single new client. Those value plus also a little bit of a CTA because I did ask for DM me, I think it was the keyword profit, so I can send them the 50-minute masterclass that I recorded for this specifically. And then here on the other side, 2 years ago, every new client I signed meant hiring another person, which was where I explained the entire model right here, the typical agency model versus the infrastructure agency model. And you can see we've got all these value content right here that was being distributed from one 50-minute long form content. And then we've got value plus CTA, which is what I said before, which is basically what we want to make sure that the person takes some action. And that is again me here, personal post, because this is where trust is really important, but also the awareness. So what we want for the conversion video is just that they're being hooked into the video and then they listen to me, and then in the video there's the call to action. I've run agencies for 3 years and I nearly killed every single one the same way, which is huge value because I could maybe even open some people's eyes on what this typical agency model has actually of an efficiency that I am right now solving with my product. And eventually it doesn't matter with what we're doing it, because at the end, the outcome is the same. The distribution engine creates engagement. So in other words, this directly has this down here as an outcome. And that is where now conversion comes into play, because we've got the likes, we've got the views, we've got the comments. Like that is all data that we can now execute on. That is all data that we can retarget. Let's say, for example, someone liked this video right here. I reach out to them and find out, okay, why did you find this interesting? Or maybe they've commented on it because they want the 50-minute breakdown video. So now I can go into the appointment setting process with them and actually ask them, look, are you already using Claude Code in your business? And then go in step-by-step deeper into it, which means that is where we now go on the one side into the conversion engine, which is now our task to make sure that we filter out, okay, who has engaged with the content that we've distributed to, for example, LinkedIn. We find out who is actually our ICP, like what engages were fitting the ICP criteria. And now we get them into our DM funnel. We DM them, we start a conversation with them, and then eventually from there, we send them the resources to, of course, build trust. And even if they don't convert right away, we're going to make sure that they, for example, watch the 50-minute video. And then from there, we'll lead into appointment setting. And of course, I could make an entire video on its own on that as well, because that has some complexity to it. But if you really think about it, this is a very simple process, and we don't want to overcomplicate things too much. And that is then eventually how we then book our calls through this funnel. So that's the conversion side of things. And of course, from conversion happens revenue, which means from these calls, it now goes all into our tracking dashboard, which is again also living inside our context orbit, because it knows exactly, okay, what is happening? Who do we have a call with? What did we talk about them? Did we close them or not? What were the most common objections that we've got during that appointment? And what this now basically tracks is, okay, we've had this person that engaged with, let's say, this post. They booked in a call. We had a call with them. And let's say, for example, they were one of these opportunities and we closed them. And that is now where then the revenue comes from, which is why we can look at this engine as we've got one video, we distribute it to every platform, and we can generate revenue from it because we've got an idea of what we want to do at every single step of it. And the system just makes it inevitable for it to happen because it's all systemized. There's no manual steps in between. And then what this and this does, it gives us the perfect data to optimize from, which means now there's the optimization engine, which makes all of this just a constant cycle that adapts itself, which is the entire topic behind the context orbit, that it's an adaptive brain that knows your business at all time, because it just knows what decisions you make, what progress you make, what clients you onboard, with who you talk, what content performed, what didn't perform, what does the ICP like, what do they want to hear, and so on, the language in which you speak. So we now therefore take the optimization engine, it crawls the performance of the videos, and let's say, for example, this right here performed extremely well. It's now going to have that data, and now it's going to know more, okay, this is what I should distribute next, and this is how I should build the next video. So we've got more videos like that we can now distribute that are basically matching that exact format that just performed very well. And that is how this entire process now goes back to the ideation engine, so it can adapt what ideas it should distribute on and what ideas it should find in the first place, because it now has more data, what ideas get our ICP to actually eventually convert within this entire process. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is an exact step-by-step process on how we use Claude Code in our content engine that is backed up with a foundation, with a context orbit, to have an entire distribution engine that generates us revenue at all times. On that note, if you want this entire engine built for your company, for your business, for your personal brand, then DM me the word content on LinkedIn or click in the description on the booking link, and we're going to see if it's fit. And if yes, we'll make it happen. On that note, I'll see you in the next one.